Yeah, I joke that even after being at Microsoft for 15 years, I still wait for them to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing and say, well, "Get out of here." So I don't know that ever really goes away. It definitely plagued me in my early years, being a server admin, particularly when I got that Exchange 5.5 admin job. I mean, I had the certification and I knew my way around Exchange, but I hadn't done hardly any troubleshooting or anything like that. So. But I guess the benefit was that I did have I did have a senior guy that was on the team, and so he was kind of mentoring me along the way. But I just got in there and I was like, if somebody called me up and said, hey, we've got this Outlook client and it's they're not getting mail and we're trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm like, I check the server, I check their account, and is it all good? It's like, it's all good. It's like, okay, well, I don't have an answer for you at the moment, so let me go do a little bit of research and then I'll come back to you. And so I didn't try to BS my way through it. I just said, hey, I don't know the answer, but I can get you an answer. So, and then I would go back and I would figure it out and I would get them the answer. And, you do that 100 times and you learn a lot of stuff.
Aloha, folks, and welcome back to Degree Free, where we teach you how to get the work you want without a college degree. I'm your host, Ryan Maruyama. Now, before we get into today's episode, I did have a couple of asks for you. One of the biggest things that we hear is how people don't have a network. So if you have LinkedIn and you're trying to network, follow and connect with me. Just go to LinkedIn and search for Ryan Maruyama. Ryan, Maruyama. Two, if you'd like to get a short email every week that has different degree-free jobs, degree-free companies, and tips and tricks to get you hired without a college degree, then go to degreefree.co/newsletter and sign up. Now, today's guest is Jerry Condra, Support Engineering Manager at Microsoft. This is a great conversation where we got to peek behind the curtain of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Jerry's been there for 15 years, so he knows what's going on. We talk about how to get into IT and some of the biggest weaknesses that he sees in people that are coming up today. This episode has something for everybody. If you want to say hi to Jerry, you can find him on LinkedIn. Links to where you can find him and everything else that we talk about in the episode will be at degreefree.co/Jerry Condra. And without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jerry Condra. Aloha, folks, and welcome back to Degree Free. I am super excited to have today's guest on, Jerry Condra. Jerry, thank you so much for making the time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. I think it's very cool to just be invited. So thank you.
Jerry, I wanted to start kind of at the present and kind of going over what it is that you do and the company that you work for. If you could just give us a little bit of your background, that would be great.
Yeah, so for the last nearly 15 years, I've been working for Microsoft. Started out as what we called back in the day, called a premier field engineer, working in the world of Exchange, Outlook, all that sort of stuff. So, I wore many hats before that, but Exchange was kind of my bread and butter coming into Microsoft. After doing that for a few years, I moved into a role called technical account management. Basically, that was delivering against contracts that customers had purchased through Microsoft. So I managed, consumption of contracts, optimization, troubleshooting, all those types of things for various customers. A lot of that time was specifically within the Department of Defense. So I spent a lot of time working with those folks. And then about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to get into people management and, kind of explore that side of the business. So for the last 3 years, I've been a people manager. So I've managed teams anywhere from 30 to 35 consultants, engineers, down to currently I'm managing about 11 engineers, a team of 11 engineers. And, just addressing customer needs, helping customers restore service or optimize or get to the next iteration of whatever technology they're on, just provide that ongoing support and help them realize their solutions and objectives and things like that. So that's pretty much for the last 15 years what I've been doing.
When you say people manager, what is that opposed to? Whereas that's rather being like a fingers on keyboard manager?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, so we say people manager because you're responsible from an HR perspective for a team of individual contributors. There's also a business aspect of it, but you could be a manager of a program and not necessarily be managing people. So at least within Microsoft, we call it being a people manager, where you're managing individual contributors, but you also work within the business. You're working on moving the business forward, whatever that may be for the business. So there's kind of two parts to it, but my primary role is taking care of and supporting and being there for the folks on my team.
Going from people manager and being a manager of a product, like in your current role, like how much technical skills are you using? From what it sounds like you used to be in a much more technical role, like hands-on when you were doing Exchange at the very beginning.
Yep.
But now it kind of seems like with the people management, it's kind of all soft skills and kind of just, as you said, removing roadblocks for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, some of the guys that I work with are still, super technical guys. They could jump into a case and, just start working with a customer, troubleshooting and things like that. Personally, I haven't been on a server console or user interface for probably almost 10 years. So what my technical background allows me to do is have a conversation with people and understand what they're saying, where they're going, what that means. It's like, okay, I may not be able to get into the weeds with you, but I can, understand what you're telling me and, kind of help go from there.
What made you want to make the change to a people manager? What was the impetus of that?
Well, I had done the account management thing for a long time, so I really understood that part of the business. And, I just was looking for, another aspect of the business to kind of work in. And, I really started doing a lot of, probably 5 years ago, I really started doing a lot of reading and personal development, professional development, leadership stuff. And I kind of realized that at this stage of my career, that was the next logical step for me, was to kind of go that route. And, so I had already had a lot of experience around working with individual contributors. I didn't manage them necessarily, but, I had to work with them on the contracts that I had for my customers. And, I felt like it was a good fit for me. And so it was just sort of me. It's kind of a natural progression. One of the things I've noticed in my career is about every 5 years, I start thinking about, okay, where am I going next? What's the next role for me? And that's just how I've kind of gone through my career.
Just to give some definitions for the people listening, could we define what individual contributors?
Yeah, so if you're an individual contributor, that means you don't have anybody reporting to you. You're just, worker bee is not the right word, because the people that I work with are not just worker bees. They're extremely talented people that do their job. So, but, an individual contributor is somebody that, is working in the business, is working on solutions and outcomes and things like that for customers. They're the ones that are putting hands on keyboards and things like that for the most part. So, when you talk about individual contributors, it's not a manager. So that's basically what it looks like.
Excellent. You kind of said 5 years ago that you started to look at professional development more seriously. What were you doing? You said you were reading, but what books were you reading? What resources?
So I started with John Maxwell. I'm sure, your listeners and many other people are very familiar with John Maxwell. He's one of the foremost leadership guys out there. So I just started reading a lot of his books and, listening to podcasts and things like that, I was introduced to other books and other speakers and things like that. So I just kind of expanded from there. But, I was constantly reading and trying to understand myself better and understand, how to, develop those soft skills that are needed for leadership. And, it was just something that I wanted to be able to understand. So that's where I started.
I kind of wanted to talk about your stint at Microsoft so far. One of the reasons why I was really excited to have this conversation is because, as you said, you've been at Microsoft for 15 years now. And in a day and age where so many people are kind of like going from job to job, and, I'll take responsibility for some of that. We tell people one of the best ways to get like a pay raise and everything like that is to every few years, 1 to 2 years, take that leap, go get that pay raise somewhere else, go get that title raise somewhere else, and then take that somewhere else next time. What are the advantages of staying at Microsoft for 15 years? And then on the flip side of that, what are some of the disadvantages?
Yeah, so I think, working at Microsoft for 15 years, I mean, it's been an amazing ride for me. As an IT guy, at least for me, Microsoft was sort of the pinnacle. If you get to Microsoft, it's like getting to the NBA or the NFL or something like that as an IT guy. So, it's not perfect, but, I've been able to work with some amazing people. And I think, in terms of just the job hopping and things like that, that's never been something I liked to do. I mean, you're absolutely right. People bounce around and they, get 20, 30% increases and stuff like that. I've always been the type of person that liked to, come into a position, grow in the position, work with the teams and other leaders and just kind of branch out from there and just kind of grow and build that foundation. Maybe it's a fault. I don't know. But for me, it's worked best for me in my career to go into a role, kind of, grow and just kind of stay there and contribute long term. I think part of the benefit of staying long term is you get to really see the vision that that particular company has, and have impact towards that vision, and just be a key part of that growth. I think job hopping doesn't always give you that. I guess it depends on the role that you're in, but job hopping doesn't always give you that ability. Definitely some of the benefits of job hopping are, like you said, increasing your income. You definitely expose yourself to a whole different network. Getting to learn about new people and new ways of doing business. If you go from Microsoft to Amazon, it's going to be a completely different experience. Before Microsoft, I was at HP, and it was kind of the same there. I just went in there and wanted to grow, and then Microsoft came along, and I was like, man, I'll retire from here if they'll let me.
And so that was actually a perfect segue, because I was going to ask you next is, do you plan on staying there until retirement?
Yes, to some degree. I do have a little side business for coaching, and for coaching business folks and life coaching, business coaching, that type of thing. Ideally, when I turn 60, I would love to. These days, I would love to walk away from corporate, because corporate, after you've been in corporate for a long time, there's just some things that are, particularly today, it's changing so much, that so unpredictable. Particularly, if you're watching the news today, there's so much going on, with our economy. I want to be able to have something that's mine, something that I can fall back on. And so I'm building that side business, and somewhere down the road, I'm 50, almost 57, so it's not like I got a long ways to go. But somewhere around 60, I could see myself tapping out of corporate and doing the coaching thing full time, speaking and that type of thing.
Amazing. Are you actively taking clients right now for your coaching?
I do.
Perfect. Give yourself a plug. Where can people learn more about your coaching?
Well, you can. I don't actually have a website. That's because it is just a fledgling business right now. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can certainly catch me on LinkedIn and reach out to me if you wanted to. Because I do work 40, 50 hours a week. I don't carry a full load of clients, but I do have 2 or 3 at the moment.
Awesome. One of the things that I did want to ask you, and you don't have to answer within yourself, or you don't have to answer the question at all if you don't want to, but we were talking about raises and switching around from company to company. Just specifically speaking from Microsoft, you've been there for a long time. How is Microsoft with giving raises? When in the same role? Like typically when I was working in corporate America, like I worked for public regional bank, and they would give the typical 2 to 3% inflation raise every year if you didn't move up. Like if you didn't, but even when you did move up, the raises were not very big. Like I would literally see a listing for like an external listing for a job that let's just say it was $60,000, but if you were internal and you were making 30, they would only get you to like 45 or 50, which is kind of insanity to me. But a lot of people have the dream of working in tech and working for these big companies, but they never get to see how the inner workings of like how the pay actually works. Yeah. And so I was wondering if you could shed some light on that. Yeah.
Having moved into the people manager role, I do get direct exposure to that. And so it was a little bit eye-opening when I came into this role. For the last few years that I've been in it, you're right, the raises have been pretty minimal, 2-3%, that right around there. Now, where Microsoft does reward people is around stock options, around stock and bonuses. So you can do really well with stocks and bonuses. So just kind of give you a range, if you're a consultant or, even a manager or something like that, your bonus could be 20% of your base eligible salary. So you could, you could see someone coming in with a bonus of $20,000, $30,000, and then stock, you could get, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of stock, and that vests every 90 days. So, it's, and that's where Microsoft has really focused its rewards, is around bonuses and stock, not so much the pay. I will say, in this last year, though, Microsoft did up the compensation from a raise perspective, and we saw definitely better raises this last year. So hopefully that continues. So we'll see.
There's a really important aspect that I kind of just wanted to pick here for people's personal financial aspect for their lives. It can really matter where you choose to work. And what I mean by that is for you, 15 years of working at Microsoft, and then also if you were getting, stock or options, stock options for the entire time, that could be a considerable amount if you pick the right horse, right? So a lot of people will say, oh, I'm going to go to this startup because they're going to pay me, $100,000. And right now I'm getting paid $60,000 with a $20,000 bonus or a $20,000 stock option package. If you pick the right horse and you stick with it, there's the opportunity of a very large payoff. Whereas the cash, when you go to startups, most startups fail, right? I mean, it's just a statistic that every 2 year or a startup doesn't make it to 2 years. Most 50-60% fail before they reach 2 years. And so that's something that I think a lot of people listening have to take into consideration when thinking about where they're going to move in their career.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to what is your appetite for risk? What's your risk profile? And I think that may be why I stick around with the same companies for a long time, is because my appetite for risk is not as great as others. They're willing to step out and go, you know what, I may flop, but I'm going to go and try and see what happens with this startup. I've seen people do that. I'm a pretty conservative guy when it comes to risk taking, even in my investing and things like that. So that's just kind of my profile.
I kind of wanted to go way back.
Okay.
I was doing some research and looking at your LinkedIn. I saw that you were in the military at one point.
I was, yeah.
And from what it says on your LinkedIn is you got out of the Army in 89, and then there's about an 11-year gap where your next job listed is assist admin at SRA. And I wanted to know, what did you do in the 10 years after the military?
Oh gosh, lots of things. Let's see, after I got out of the military, I spent probably about 8 years working for Walmart. Believe it or not, I wanted to go into, management. And this is back in the day when Walmart was, Monday through Saturday, closed on Sundays. It was open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it was kind of a good gig, but the longer I stayed there and, this was another area where I went in as a stock clerk guy. I just wanted to go in and let me just learn from the ground up. And then, eventually I'll get to a point where I can go into a manager training program. But great, you didn't have to have a degree. So I did that for a long time, went through all sorts of different positions within the store. And they did eventually ask me if I wanted to go into the manager training program, but by then, the hours that managers were working was just ridiculous. And I was like, no, I'm doing something different. So I got out of there. I started working for a hotel. Worked for a hotel as a manager for a few years, probably a couple of years. And then around that time is probably when I got introduced to IT, because this would have been around the mid 90s, roughly. So I got a job pulling cable here in San Antonio. If you're familiar with the San Antonio area, well, maybe you're not, but Seguin is about 45 miles up the road, and I got a job pulling cable at what was Motorola at the time. Motorola plant out there. It's not the Motorola plant anymore, but so I worked out there for about a year pulling cable, and that's where I actually was introduced to sort of the world of Microsoft and Novell and some of these other places. I was pulling cable in an area where the only air-conditioned area was the computer room. It was what we call a fishbowl, because it was all the walls were just glass, so you could see in. And I saw this guy in there, and he was standing at this big console, and I'm out there sweating my tail off pulling cable. And so I just went in there and said, hey, what are you doing? He says, oh, I'm setting up this Novell network. And I was like, I didn't know what Novell network was at the time. I don't even know if Novell's still around. But, I was in a nice air-conditioned area, and I was like, I want to do this. And so I started kind of looking into that a little bit, and that led me to a boot camp that was for Microsoft certifications. And then, ironically enough, my father-in-law, we went to visit, and this right around the time my wife and I got married. And I think it was my first time visiting them up there in Virginia. And he had on his office wall a certification for Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. And I'd been looking into that, and I said, hey, what do you think about that? And he says, I think it's a great idea. And so I was like, okay, I'm sold. So I came back to San Antonio, and there was a school that was open here at the time, and it was 8 months of certifications, and that kind of got me into that world. And so my official IT career, I would say, launched in 1999. So between the time of getting out of the military and getting into that schooling, there was just odd jobs, Walmart, and then I worked doing the pulling the cable. I worked at a furniture store, so just a bunch of odd jobs like that, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and when I was in my late 20s, early 30s.
See, that's amazing, because the reason why I ask about that specific time is that a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they're in that time of their life right now.
Yeah.
They're making that transition, and it's just so helpful to have people like yourself that have been there, right? And as you said, stocking shelves at Walmart, right? And sweating, pulling cable, and seeing something that you want, not sure how to get it, but then figure out how to do it, come up with a plan, and then execute that plan. Yep. And I think that is the most important thing that we could do, is basically just highlighting what you've done and how to get there. With the certification that you got, was it a full-time thing, or were you still working pulling cable?
Oh yeah, no, I was still working. So I was working a full-time job, and I went to school. I went to the school 2 nights a week, and then every other Saturday for 8 hours. So 2 nights a week I was at the school from 6 to 10. So I went in there after work and did the class from 6 to 10, and then you had to do your studying and things like that, preparing for the certifications as they came along. And then those long days on Saturdays, went 8 months with a whole lot of Saturdays that I didn't get to have. But those are the things that you do. And I was fired up about it. I was like, man, this is awesome. I'm gonna get to use this. I finally have clarity on where I want to go and what I want to do. So that was nice.
After that, you got that certification and you were like looking for jobs. What did that job search look like? Because from my understanding, you had never done it before, but now you have this certification. Was it just like hallelujah and the doors just opened up for you as soon as you put in your applications? Were people knocking on your door to get in? What did that look like?
No, not quite. So there was a little bit of a road trip there where I landed a job. I can't remember how I came across this job. Can't remember where it was, if it was an ad or something like that, because this is in the the late 90s, so we didn't have much of the internet. We had the internet, but it was nothing like it is today. And so I got a job setting up computers in the local school systems here in San Antonio. And so I did that for probably close to a year, setting up, just going to school by school, setting, just bringing in all these computers and getting them set up and configured and all that for the network. And then a buddy of mine was in IT. He was a programmer at the time, and he was working for a little contract consulting company that worked primarily on a technology called Tivoli at the time. Don't know if Tivoli's around anymore or not either. But so he was a really good friend of mine, and I'd credit him for getting me that first real job, after setting up PCs for so long. So I was in this consulting company, and that consulting company was at Fort Sam Houston here in San Antonio. And while I was there, I came across another job, and because during the certification boot camp that I went through, Exchange was one of my certifications, and so Exchange 5.5 at the time, and so I started making friends with some of the guys that are at Fort Sam, and turns out they needed an Exchange 5.5 admin. And I was like, well, I've got a certification. I don't have a whole lot of experience, but I got a certification. They said, well, let's interview you. So they interviewed me. I got the job and left that little consulting company and went to Fort Sam and worked as their Exchange 5.5 admin for, about 4 years, I guess. And then that led to another job that, got me closer to HP. And so it was just one little door opening after another, so it was a lot of networking. I will say that if there's anything you can do out there, it's network with people, particularly in the fields that you're looking to go into. Figure out a way to find out who those people are. Maybe you've got a friend, something like that. But that's probably where most of my jobs have come from, is just who you know and who knows you.
Absolutely. And that's the most common thread that we've seen with all of our past guests. And the numbers show it. Depending on the survey, 40 to 80% of all jobs are filled informally. And that's like through people's network.
Yeah.
And what it seems like the key piece for everybody is obviously, yes, who you know, but exactly what you just said is like, who knows you?
Yes.
And what you're doing to further yourself and your goals. Like you had these Microsoft certifications, but you weren't doing that job yet. But when the opportunity was there for you, you could say, I'm ready to take it. I'm ready to jump on it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes by Louis Pasteur is, he says, chance favors the prepared mind. And, you gotta be ready. The opportunities will come, but are you ready for those opportunities? That's what it really comes down to.
Exactly. And I wanted to talk about when you were doing your first role, because you went from getting certified, had never done it before, ever, and now you have this role and you're in a completely different environment. How was it when first starting out? One of the things that we see is that there's so much imposter syndrome. One of the things that we tell people is one of the best ways to get your foot in the door is to get a certification if it's right for you. But then everybody's just like, oh, they won't hire me because I don't have any experience. And then if they do get hired, they are absolutely terrified of like messing it up.
Yeah.
And so there's this imposter syndrome of like, I don't belong here. I can barely type Microsoft. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I joke that, even after being at Microsoft for 15 years, I still wait for them to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing and say, wait, get out of here. So I don't know that ever really goes away. It definitely plagued me in my early years, being a server admin, particularly when I got that Exchange 5.5 admin job. I mean, I had the certification and I knew my way around Exchange, but, I hadn't done, hardly any, troubleshooting or anything like that. So, but I guess the benefit was that, I did have a senior guy that was on the team. And so, he was kind of mentoring me along the way. But, I just got in there and I was like, if somebody called me up and said, hey, we've got this Outlook client and it's they're not getting mail and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm like, I check the server, I check, their account and, is it all good? It's like, it's all good. It's like, okay, well, I don't have an answer for you at the moment. So let me go do a little bit of research and then I'll come back to you. And so, I didn't try to BS my way through it. I just said, hey, I don't know the answer, but I can get you an answer. So, and then I would go back and I would figure it out and I would get them the answer. And, you do that 100 times and you learn a lot of stuff. So, it's fearful, because you're just waiting for the hammer to drop and for them to let you go. But luckily that never happened.
What we've figured is that learning how to find the answer is more important than having the answer, because you're always going to brush up. If you're always stretching, if you're always trying to better yourself, you're always going to run into a situation or a scenario where you don't know the answer. And so you have to go and you have to know how to find it. And it could be as simple as knowing the correct person to ask.
Yeah.
Right. It could be as simple as knowing especially nowadays, like knowing what to type into Google.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for systems administrators or some stuff like that, if you have a big knowledge base or something like that, like just knowing how to get that information out of it and then handing that information to the right people to then go make decisions on whatever's going on.
Yeah, I think within Microsoft, that was probably one of the things that I learned right away going into Microsoft was that everybody there wants to see you succeed. And everybody is, it's like there's always somebody smarter than you, always. And so, you find those people. And what I found is that everybody in Microsoft was totally willing to share their knowledge. Before Microsoft, that wasn't always the case. When I worked with different contract companies, consulting companies, people kind of hoarded their knowledge because it made them indispensable, so to speak. And so they didn't really want to share a whole lot because, if they teach you, well, now there's two people that can do this. And maybe they don't need me because I, make too much money. So they let me go and let this other guy, keep working because he makes less but has the same knowledge. But in Microsoft, it's like everybody just wants to teach you to fish. And, so there's always somebody you can reach out to. Now, when I was in my technical role, I mean, gosh, man, even today, the team that I manage today, they're some of the smartest guys in Microsoft. And they are constantly in teams, asking questions. Hey, do you know how to do this? Have you seen that? And these are some super, super smart guys and gals. But, you can't know it all. So you got to be able to just accept that and, let somebody know. Because I think what I found is that, clients, if you'll just don't try to BS them, just say, look, I don't have the answer for you, but I've got the entire backing of Microsoft and I will get you the answer that you need. So, and those knowledge bases, we've got an amazing knowledge base at Microsoft. So yeah, you can definitely dig into that.
Yeah, that's something that's really important. And a lot of people, unfortunately, as you were saying, they don't have that within their own company, but you can also foster that within certain professional groups. As long as you're not giving away like proprietary data or anything like that.
Right.
But like I've noticed that for myself, since I've switched over to being a full-time entrepreneur, business owner, I'm on an island, right? Like I don't have a company to bounce ideas off of or other people within it. So I had to create a quote unquote network of people that are also doing a very similar thing where we can get together and just spitball ideas and be like, I don't know, is this dumb? And and most of the time they say yes, which I appreciate them for.
Yeah, you're building community, and that's super important.
We're talking about people that are making big transitions into a very new role. Like a lot of people that are listening to this, there are blue collar workers, they're teachers, they're nurses that have an established career, but they kind of exactly experiencing what you did, which they want to get off their feet and they want to go sit in that air conditioned room and sit in front of that computer instead. What are some of the weaknesses that you see in newer people in your field? You're a people manager now, and it can be something from hard skills, IT related, engineering related, or it could be something soft skills. People don't know how to communicate. Are there any tips for those that are trying to break into your industry?
Yes, I would say a couple of things come to mind is when people come into the IT world, their expectations are not accurate. They think they're going to come in and make $300,000 a year, and without a whole lot of experience, and it's just not going to happen. There are jobs out there. You look at the software engineering field and things like that. You do Google and Facebook or Meta now, whatever they are, and there's definitely some jobs like that, but you're not walking out of college into those jobs. So I think expectations are not accurate. They come in and they think, "Oh, I'm going to make a whole bunch of money and get all these bonuses and get my Ferrari and all that sort of thing." So I think that's one. And then the other big weakness of people breaking into the business is they lack a network. So like we talked about earlier, is that you having that network of people that and who know you that can help you get where you want to go. So that's a couple of things. And then particularly in the tech field, for consultants, engineers, things like that, I think the hard skills, the tech skills, that's the easy stuff. I mean, you can learn that all day long. Soft skills are hard to learn. And when we're interviewing people, we're looking at, less about tech skills, and at least as a manager, I'm looking less at the tech skills because the tech guys are doing that analysis. So I'm looking at, how does this person present themselves? How do they answer questions? How do they think? How do they, can they think on their feet? Can they just have a conversation and kind of feel comfortable? Those are things that are hard to, you can learn them. Absolutely. Because I did. I mean, it's not like I'm a natural at being a manager. I had to learn it. But it's harder to learn soft skills than it is those tech skills.
That is a very common thread for those longtime listeners listening. They're going to be almost sick of it because that is exactly what everybody says. But it's so true. And one of the things that people have said before, and I agree with, is that soft skills for most jobs, this is most jobs, not really, really technical jobs. Soft skills is like 80% of it. And the 20% you can learn exactly what you said. Like you can learn the vocabulary, you can learn the jargon. And for a lot of people listening, exactly where you're at now, you can start in a more technical position and then transition your career from there. Just because you start, being an engineer or being a programmer or even a sysadmin, right? Like you're a systems administrator or you're a database or a data analytics person, once you get your foot in the door, you can move around, and that moving around is all soft skills.
It is. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, I was, when I first came into Microsoft, first time I had to go in front of customers, I was terrified, so you gotta learn how to do that and be comfortable with it. and be comfortable with flopping because it's going to happen. You're going to flop. So just expect it. But that's part of just learning how to kind of manage that and, overcome it and get better and better.
Regarding realistic expectations, I kind of wanted to drill just a little bit deeper there because that was the first time that anybody's answered that. And I think that I agree with you. But other than just salary expectations, how can people come into the IT world with realistic, like what are some examples other than money, if there are any, that are realistic expectations?
Yeah, I think, it's not that glamorous. There are some cool times being an IT guy whenever you save the day. That's awesome. But there's a lot of boring, mundane work that you'll do. There's, like I said, there'll be times of excitement, putting out new products and, customers praising you for it, things like that. But there's also the side of it of dealing with, frustrated, angry customers. A lot of times the job is just keeping the lights on, making sure that the system is humming along and clients are able to accomplish their work without issues. So, there's definitely that component of it's not all, it's not rock star status, so don't come in expecting that. And I think that's some of the, I'll give you an example. One of the guys that was on my team, he was brand new out of college and he came into Microsoft, super sharp guy, super smart, did great work with the customers. Customers loved him. And after about a year and a half, he's like, you know what? I just don't think this is for me. I feel like, there's something else I want to do. And he just felt called to something different. And, that mundane day in, day out, doing a lot of the same things, I think he realized that wasn't for him. And I think that, you gotta think about that. What is it you really want out of the job that you're looking for? What's going to gratify you and satisfy you on a deeper level than just pulling a paycheck?
It seems with IT, and this is as a layperson, it seems almost mundane is better, just because that means everything's humming along, like everything's greased and going as it should. And is that accurate?
It is, yeah, to some degree. I mean, there's always going to be something that's probably going to break or something like that. Hotfix comes out and next service pack comes out or whatever, and things get broken. But I spent the 4 years that I spent with HP working for a DoD customer. It got boring. You're just, like I said, you're keeping the lights on. It's the same old Outlook issues, the same kind of problems, and so it would just get kind of boring. Whereas there are certain roles that you can get into, like a consulting role in Microsoft. You're probably going to work with couple of customers at a time, and you're rolling out new technology, deploying new things, learning their environment, getting them set up, and then closing out that gig, and then going on to the next one, which is another customer with a whole different set of problems. And so things are new, things are fresh. And so, but if you're in an admin type of role, you're probably not going to you're not going to see that as much. So it is going to be more of a mundane type of it's still cool. If you're a tech guy, you love being on the console. You love, looking at what's going on with the server, looking at logs and trying to figure out, is it broke? Is there something I need to do? So, I don't want to make it sound like, you're digging a ditch, because it's nothing like that. But, there is some aspect of it that can be mundane. And for some people, that's great. They're fine and happy, and hey, that's cool. I'll come in, 8 to 5, nothing's broke. I get to go home, be with my family. But some people, they want to stay up all night and figure things out. So it just kind of depends on kind of your personality and what you want.
It's not often that we get a glimpse into a bigger company like Microsoft. And so one of the things that people are looking for nowadays, like 60% of people that are looking for a job are looking for remote work right now. And so I was wondering, in Microsoft, in this large company, how much of it is distributed? Is your role distributed? How much of your department is distributed? If you can kind of give us like a peek behind the curtain of remote roles.
Let me start with pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, I did have customers, and I would be on customer sites. I'd go into, one of my customers was here at Fort Sam, and I spent most of my time there. I'd be on site probably 3 days a week. A couple of days a week, I would work from home. It was very, very flexible. Pre-COVID, obviously. And then the consultants, engineers, they were all, they were there 2 or 3 days a week. But going further back than that, whenever I was a field engineer, um, I was I was either on customer site somewhere or I was working from home. I've never had an office to go to, since I've been at Microsoft, just because of the way it's distributed. Now, if I lived in Dallas at Las Colinas, where we actually have a campus that people go to frequently, my manager is there, then I would probably be in there more often. But by and large, in the organizations that I've been in, the consultants have been, like I said, either on site or working remotely from home, something like that. Um, when COVID hit, I mean, obviously, everybody was home, and we learned that even the customers learned that, hey, we can get this done without people being on site. So, and that's what Microsoft has done. We've really got this hybrid model of, let's if you're in a location where there's an office, then how many days a week can you be on site? Like, I'm 100% remote in my current role, and in my previous role as a manager. I'm 100% remote, always have been, because my people are distributed across, some are in Las Colinas, some are in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then there's a smattering in those areas of people that live too far away from the office to actually come in unless there's a special occasion. So it really kind of depends on the role. But what I've seen in Microsoft with services, what we call services, and now support, is pretty much everybody is remote for the most part. Unless they decide they want to come into the office for some reason, but there's really not a need for it. But then there are, like, if you go up to Seattle, Redmond, there's a bigger push for people to be in the office up there, because it's a completely different kind of work environment, different needs, different things that are, it's hard to be in some roles and not have that face time.
Regarding people, I know it's been a while since you've interviewed at Microsoft, but I'm wondering if you have interviewed other people, if you could kind of give a glimpse into the interview process for your department. Like, a lot of places nowadays are doing multi interviews. Some places are doing, like, I had a product manager from Meta on a few months ago, and he went through 7 interviews. Right. And I think it's very typical now, even for like a small startup that has no HR team, they're doing like 4 interviews. Right. And so, wondering, for those people that are thinking about, well, maybe Microsoft might be it, they definitely want to get in there. What does a typical interview process look like?
I'll take you back to the days whenever I was first coming into Microsoft. I had an HR interview. I had 2 tech interviews, and then or on the phone tech interviews, and then I had an in-person interview where I interviewed with about 3 people. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, roughly about six interviews. And then ironically, when I moved to the account manager role, I didn't have to actually interview with that one. And I think it's because the customer was a customer that I had worked with for a long time, even before Microsoft. They're in San Antonio, and they wanted someone that was local to San Antonio. So I got lucky in that regard. I didn't have to actually interview for that one. And then when I moved to my first people manager role, I did have to interview for that one. And that was 3 interviews only, but that's because I'm an internal candidate. So if you're an internal candidate, you typically only have to interview what we call finals day. And that's usually about three interviews. And then when I came to so let me just back up a little bit. Back in July this year, I was actually there was a big restructure in the org that I was in, and my position, along with 1,800 others, were eliminated. And so I was in scramble mode for a couple of months, and I managed to land the role that I'm in right now, and back in August. So I started that in August, but I did have to interview for that one as well. So I had what did I have? I only had 2 interviews for that one. And again, that's, because I'm an internal candidate. If you're an external candidate, and I've done lots of interviews, as a manager, if you're an external candidate, typically you're going to get that HR interview. So they're going to just, sort of scope you and, is your resume and what you say really match up? Are you potentially a fit for the role for Microsoft, really, at that level? And then you'll have a couple of tech interviews. and then you'll get that finals day. If you make it that far, you'll have that finals day interview, and that's typically we have 2 tech interviews and one manager interview. So you'll have 3 interviews on finals day, where you have you're interviewing with a couple of technical folks and then with a manager. So, and I don't analyze technical skills anymore. Like I said, I analyze soft skills, and is this person a fit? Maybe not for this role. It doesn't even have to be for this role. One of the things that we do in Microsoft is, if you apply for a role and you don't really match up to it based on your skill sets or whatever, but we think that you embody all these other attributes of Microsoft, you'd be a good fit. You just need to learn some tech. Then you could potentially get hired anyways. You just may not be for that particular job. We would refer you to another manager for, hey, we think this guy or this girl would be a good fit in your org, so they would get interviewed over there.
Brilliant. With that specifically, when if you don't think that they're going to be a good fit here, but they may be a good fit there, is that also for external candidates as well, or is it just for
No, that's external. That when I was referring to, that's external candidates.
Oh, that was external. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we're looking for people who, even if you don't fit a particular role, but you could be, a good fit for Microsoft overall. Maybe instead of being a field engineer or a consultant, maybe you'd be a good account manager, or maybe you'd be a good architect or something like that. It just kind of depends on, how did you interview? If you interview well, then, because really, when you're coming into any company, you want to make sure that you're a good fit to the team, because, you got to work with these people.
I wanted to ask you, just because you've been in the industry for so long and you work at a very large company right now, there's a lot of tech layoffs and hiring freezes going on, right? Like, it's almost like the whole tech industry is just like crumbling down, it seems like. And so one of the biggest questions, one of the most frequently asked questions that we get right now is like, I am thinking about making this transition into tech, and it could be IT, data analytics, whatever it is, but I'm really concerned about all of these tech layoffs and all of these hiring freezes going on there. I don't know if there's like longevity in these roles or the viability of the industry in general. I was wondering if you had an opinion on what you think the outlook for, tech and for hiring is, within the short and long-term future.
Yeah, it'd be very much pure speculation, but I think there's definitely still jobs out there, and there's always going to be jobs. There's always going to be little companies hiring and things like that. So my recommendation to someone that's looking to break into tech would be, if that's really what you want to do, then prepare yourself. Get your certifications. This might be a good time to do some volunteer work, with some type of an organization to kind of get some experience, create that network, that type of thing. Because we're obviously in a downturn. It's not going to last forever. There's going to be an upturn at some point. But what I found when I was doing my own job search a couple months ago was there's a lot of people hiring. Even though we're in a downturn, there's still a lot of consulting companies that are still hiring. So the big, all you see really are the really big companies, the Metas, the Googles, the Microsoft. They're the ones that really, just really bloomed in COVID because of what was needed. But those smaller companies, seems like they didn't blow up as much as like Meta just laid off 11,000 people. Part of that was because of they hired all these people. We did the same thing. Microsoft did the same thing. We hired a whole bunch of people, and now we're having to shed some of that. And but I think eventually it'll turn back. I think, but the market's going to be a little bit flooded for a while. I think.
I agree with you completely. I think that right now is a perfect time for people to exactly what you said, like kind of sharpen your weapons or sharpen your skills, prepare yourself for your future roles. And as you said, like smaller companies are still out there hiring. One of the things I was just talking to the chief economist at ZipRecruiter, And, we were talking about the different industries that are seeing, declines and then increases. And as what the job report said, tech is experiencing decline, and then all the things that were affected by COVID, by shutting down, are seeing increases. So hospitality, construction, things of that nature. And, one of the things that I haven't spoken about on this podcast yet, I think it's good for those listeners out there, is if you want to work in tech, you don't have to work at a quote unquote tech company. Like, you can go and be a ServiceNow administrator, Salesforce administrator at a construction company. You can go to one of these burgeoning industries. If the hotel laid off all of their people, but now now people are coming back to the workforce. People are starting to travel again. They're going to need people to upkeep their Salesforce instance. And so get that Salesforce admin and learn what you're doing, and then go apply to roles in those industries. And then when it comes back around, and if you want to make the transition into the FANG companies, into Microsoft, then you've got 1 to 2 years underneath your belt, and now you can go do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, you've had a little time to build that network. I have two very good friends here in San Antonio that are both in tech, and they both work for ironically, you said construction, and they work for a construction company here in San Antonio. One's a project manager and the other was a cyber guy. And they've been there for years, but it's just a small construction company. But yeah, it doesn't have to be the big mothership to, unless that's where you want to go. And that's just a matter of preparing and making your way that way.
Yeah, definitely. When people starting out now, we kind of touched on networking a bunch in the periphery, but we didn't get to the meat and potatoes of it. When building your network, when you don't have one, what are some tips for people out there? Like, I'll tell you what happened for me. Like, I was a college grad. I went to go work at a regional bank, hated it. I was basically a monkey with a headset, and it was terrible. Did it for a year. I never stopped bartending, so I just quit, went full-time to bartending again. And I was just stuck, and I didn't know. I knew that I wanted to get off my feet for 10 hours a shift, even though I was making good money, but I just didn't know anybody else that was doing it. And a lot of people that are listening to that's their life story right now. Like, a lot of people are listening to this while they're out doing their landscaping job, or, they're driving to their job, which they hate, and they can't even figure out, where do I start building a network?
Well, my first recommendation would be to get on LinkedIn. And then start getting yourself attached to groups within LinkedIn that are in the industry that you want to go into. Because there's just hundreds of thousands of groups out there that you can become a part of, and just you'll begin to make connections that way. The other thing is, locally, look for groups that meet in the industry we're looking to go into. Like here in San Antonio, there are quite a few groups, for various technologies that meet. Before COVID, it was quite a bit. Not as familiar with it now, since we're just coming out of COVID. But prior to that, I mean, this one place that I used to frequent, they had a monthly SharePoint forum there, and there was always about 100 people in that room. So and I'm just speaking from tech, but I'm sure any industry you look at, real estate or banking or whatever, I'm sure there's groups that you can get into in your local area that where you can go and just start making friends. That's really what it comes down to, just making contacts. I forget the name of there's an app that I had joined a long time ago. I think it's called Meetup, and you could go in and you could search for your area for different types of industries that you wanted to and just go to a meeting and get to know people that way. So that's where I would start is LinkedIn, and then just finding those groups and just starting to build that network that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the local aspect of that, I think, is very underrated. And the reason why is because everybody says to get on LinkedIn, right? And that's great advice, because everybody is on LinkedIn, and right, like, LinkedIn has cornered the market on white collar professional networking. Like they corner the market on it. And so if you want to get a computer job, if you want to sit down in a chair in an air conditioned room, LinkedIn is where you should be in order to do it. But I think a lot of people discount locally, and they're just like, well, if I do it locally, then that doesn't scale, right? Like I can only network with the 100 people that are at that event at that one time. But I think that that's a mistake, because at those events or at this, dinner or whatever it is that you're going to go to at this meetup, you can have more intimate connections with these people. And there's something to be said for meeting people, face to face, belly to belly. And where you can interface and you can say, this is what I'm trying to do without all the noise. Like I can tell you my life story. This is a good example. You and I are just here having this conversation, and I'm kind of telling you a little bit about myself. You're telling me a little bit about yourself. And if this was a professional networking thing, I could tell you, hey, Jerry, I'm thinking about, a role at Microsoft or in tech. These are my skill sets, yada, yada, yada. And this is what I'm looking for. And then you heard that in a very low noise environment. And then you can keep that in the back of your mind. And, when a role opens up, you'll reach out to me or, be, hey, just send me an email. Like I thought about you.
I think with, when you think about the local people, if there's 100 people there, how many contacts do they have? So if you meet and have good conversations with 5 people and they know 10 other people in that same industry. And like you said, if y'all have a good conversation, make a connection, maybe they don't have a specific role or job that they can refer you to, but maybe somebody in their network says, hey, we're looking for X, Y, and Z, and they think of you, and they're like, hey, you might want to check this guy out. So, there's definitely, it's just exponentially growing if you look at it from that perspective. So you got to think a little wider.
Definitely. And for those listening, we've said it multiple times on this podcast, but it's been proven that it's not your first degree connections that get you your jobs. It's actually exactly what you said. It's the people, the friends of the friends that get you your next job. The one last thing on the local aspect of it is, if you don't have a group out there, like say you live in a small town and you're like you're trying to look for the tech people living in Johnsonville, wherever you're living, and you don't find it. You don't know if that group exists. One of the best things that you could do is you could just create that group. Like you can be the head of that group. You could go to Facebook and just start a quick Facebook groups and just start DMing people that be like, if you work in tech or if you want to work in tech and you live in this area, here you go. And that's a great way to be what they call a connector, somebody that connects people to one another, and that you're going to see exponential growth of your network as well. But it also forces you it's kind of an accountability thing where it kind of forces you you're like, every once a month we're going to have this meetup, and then on the 15th of every month, and then you're bound to have that day that you're just not going to want to do it, but you run the whole thing and you're like, man. And it's like, I guess I kind of have to go. I kind of committed to it. And so, yeah, so that's just for those people listening. It's local is definitely underrated, I think. And I think for networking and learning what other people do and the different possibilities out there.
I think you make a really good point about the smaller towns, because I grew up in a real small town here in Texas, and I think if I were still living in that small town, how would I do that? And I think what you just talked about was perfect. Just starting that group yourself. Maybe some of it's virtual to get started, but there's got to be 2 or 3 other people who have a similar mindset to you, and even if you're in a small town.
Totally. And then also you could also do like Reddit, or there's a bunch of Discord groups for all those people. Those are really good places to meet like-minded people, because what I found the challenge is when you're in that trudge, right? Like I was started work at 6. I didn't get off till 2 in the morning. I didn't know anybody that wanted to better their life. I didn't know anybody that wanted to get out of it, right? Everybody after 2 o'clock, the bars in Hawaii, they close at 4. So we would all go to the next bar, right? Like we closed down ours and then we would just go to the next bar and we'd be out till 4 or 5 in the morning and then rinse, repeat and do it again. And it's a vicious cycle that, like how do I get out of it? And meeting like-minded people and, getting a support group is something that, has helped me. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and we didn't really cover it, is have you ever had like a mentor in your life?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. I would highly recommend, getting a mentor, not only a mentor, but a coach. A mentor is somebody that can, take you, because they've been there. They know how to get there, what they're going through, what you're going to go through. And a coach kind of helps you, kind of like the mentor tells you how to get there. A coach helps you kind of dig into what is it you really want to do and how do you get there? How do you see yourself getting there? So, but yeah, definitely a mentor. We're big on that in Microsoft, having mentors and things like that because, and I would also say that, one of the things I did not do well early in my career was plan for my career by having a mentor and by having a development plan. And, I think if I had had a little bit more intentionality, I would have gotten to some places sooner than what I did. Everybody's on their own journey. I think there's some fate involved in it, but I think that, having a more intentional focus on what you want to do, thinking what do I want to do in 10 years? Where do I see myself? And then just kind of backtracking from there. But having a mentor definitely will help that.
There's something to be said about that starting at the end and then solving the problem backwards, right? Like that's how I prefer to solve problems. Or like if I see somewhere, it just helps to have a goal, right? Like even if you don't end up doing that goal, but just having some intentionality, right? So exactly what you said, 10 years from now, I remember when I used to do my 10-year planning, like I did that in like high school and stuff. I thought that I would be, working in finance right now and, whatever else that I thought I would be. I thought I was going to be a doctor or something like that. I never thought that I would be like sitting here talking to you for a living, right? But if you just have a little bit of intentionality and you're okay and you're willing to take the little offshoots of that, everything's going to work out and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. One of the, I listened to a guy in Microsoft. He's pretty high up in the company and he came to our organization and did a talk on career development. And, he kind of took us through how, what he did, what his story was. But what really stood out to me was he said, there's 3 people that you need, in your career. You need a mentor, you need a coach, and you need an advocate. And, we talked about mentor and coach, but an advocate is somebody that can get into rooms that you can't, that can bring your name up. So let's say your advocate is a senior leader of sorts, and they're in a meeting and they're, planning for roles, they're planning for rollouts of different things. And, you've let people know what you want to do. And that advocate's like, hey, Joe said he'd be interested in doing something like that. Why don't we check him out? But that's somebody that can get your name out there. So that's one of those 3 people. And I think that's a very cool thing to look at.
I've never heard that before. And that makes so much sense. The advocate portion of that is so important. I've never heard it put that way, but I'll just speak from personal experience. Having an advocate for you to speak exactly as you said on your behalf and to have your name in the back of their mind is extremely powerful. And the only way that you're going to get there though is by doing things in public. Exactly kind of what you said is letting that person or a group of people know that, I'm Ryan. I run the Degree Free podcast. I help people get the work they want without a college degree. And like, unless now people know that, and they can, whenever they have people that are struggling to make career transitions, or, they're just like, oh, I know a guy, and they'll forward them my way. And it's the same thing in your career. You don't have to do something as like esoteric is that, but you just be like, I'm Tina and I work in IT. Or I help companies tidy up their Salesforce implementation. And then when they're in the room, they'll be like, "Oh, I know Tina. Tina can do it."
Yeah, one of the cool stories he told in that session was that he had made it known that what he really wanted to do with his career, and he was willing to go wherever he was needed. And at the time, when they were planning for some rolling out a new office or something like that overseas in Europe, he had said, "Look, I'll do that." And so whenever that started happening, his name came up, and he ended up going and took his family and got to spend a few years over in Europe, and worked for Microsoft, and then he eventually came back to the States. But it's because he had put it out there that he was willing to do those kind of things in order to further his career.
Awesome. I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about your future and about the career transition that you're planning as far as being a coach. And a lot of people this podcast is about transitions and about changing careers. And for people that are in a similar position that have a wealth of knowledge and they are very skilled at what they do and are trying to do the same thing, transition into a more of a coaching role, how do you see yourself doing it? How are you going to accomplish that?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I got a coach. I had somebody came into San Antonio and did a talk, and I really liked what they said. So I had a couple of conversations with them, and I hired them to coach me, and they coached me for about a year. And they actually helped me get to that first people manager role. But what I really liked about that is that I'd had thoughts of doing coaching for a long time. I thought you had to have all this expertise, and I learned that that's not true. So what I did is I ended up just putting the money into myself, and I went to a coaching school, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and so I went through their course. It was about a year long, and got some certifications in that, and and with all the networking that goes along in that, obviously I still have my Microsoft job, and that's my bread and butter, and that's where I'm focused. But I just started letting people know that I've got this coaching business, and maybe give a complimentary session and see if coaching is for them. And so I've been able to grab a few clients like that. So for me, it's a matter of I'm kind of slow rolling that. I'm also now I'm looking at how do I get into speaking? How do I get gigs speaking in different places, and learning starting at little schools or starting at a small charity event, doing some free stuff. And so for me, it's, luckily I have the ability and privilege to be able to just work my job as I see it. And then, still work on that side business, after hours and on the weekends and that kind of thing. So that, for me, that's where the transition is going to happen. And, I am ramping it up a little bit now just because, the tech world is a little scary right now. I'll be honest. I think it's like that for everybody, though, right? It's not just tech; it's all over the place. But that's where I really see myself going in the next few years is moving into a full-time coaching, and doing some speaking and things like that. And I've got an idea for a book. I don't know if that'll ever come out, but it'd be interesting.
For those people that are curious about coaching in general, like about hiring a coach, about what to look for in a coach, what are some tips? One, could you explain, like, I've never had a coach, right? I've never hired one. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't know what a coach would do.
Okay.
And what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of give you a few things to think about. So a therapist is somebody that works with someone and tries to help them understand trauma, understand things about them that's happened in the past, right? So that's therapy. And that's also, licensing and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the mentor consultant. The mentor and the consultant. The mentor is going to help you get where you're going to go because they've been there and they know what it's like. The consultant is somebody that's going to come in and say they already have an agenda. Like if I'm a consultant and you hire me to roll out your next technology, I've already got the blueprint. I've already got how we do this, all that sort of stuff. I just come in, we overlay it into your network and whatever we're going to do, and then we start deploying. A coach says, let's say that somebody comes out of therapy and they've dealt with all their trauma and now they want to move forward. So a coach is somebody that comes in and we use energy leadership within IPEC, Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And we help people, kind of deal with these internal blockers, like we call this thing the gremlin. Somebody, I'm just not good enough. I don't have enough education. I'm not pretty enough. We help people kind of overcome that and, help them realize that, why are you telling yourself that? That's an internal dialogue that you have. So let's get past that. We just kind of help people come up with a plan to get where they want to go next. And, I'll just give you my own example was my coach, we met about once a month and, he would just come in and he would just ask a whole lot of really good questions, which made me really dig in and try to understand, okay, that's what this means to me. And this is how I want to do it. Because what I've found in coaching is that 9 times out of 10, people have the answer within themselves. They just need somebody to help them get it out. And that's what coaching does.
That's amazing. One of the things, like the best job search advice that I can give anybody, and I really mean it, even though I've told people this and they're just like, this is BS, but it's confidence. And that confidence stems, what I found, from your self-talk and how you relate to exactly what you called gremlins, and I'll just speak for myself. Like, I'll beat myself up all day about, not being qualified for this or not being qualified for that. And it's literally stopped me from doing the simplest things. Like, it has stopped me from hitting that apply button, right? It has stopped me from, like, my boss, asked me to do this extra task. And it's like, I know that it's going to take like 20 hours of basically overtime, but I'm just like, whatever. I guess like, this is actually a real life example. Like, I was working in banking and my counterpart called in sick, and at 5:45 on a Friday night, we get off at 6 on Fridays. My boss came to me with a stack of paperwork. Boom, do this, and and I'll just like, I didn't have the confidence to just be like, whoa, that's like my counterpart's work. I'll do it, but I can just do it on Monday, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, but I ended up staying there till like 9 o'clock. Didn't get paid extra to do it, right? But I'll fumble interviews because I'm just not confident. And so I think that's really valuable to have somebody there that can, like, as you said, just kind of pull it out of you.
Yeah, we talk about gremlins. We talk about internal blockers. Assumptions. Limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs is huge. That's something that I've dealt with. A good part of my life is, telling myself that, I'm not good enough. I can never get out of this little town I'm in. And, I'm going to end up working at the gas station or 7-Eleven or whatever. And that's going to be my life, getting outside of that is so important and so key, because otherwise you risk being stuck somewhere, just living a life that you didn't want to live.
Awesome. Jerry, I don't want to take up your whole day. I did have a couple of questions though before we go. The first one, we kind of touched on the books for professional development, but I was wondering if you had any other books or resources to point people towards for anything that we've talked about today, whether it's about IT or becoming more technical, soft skills, coaching.
Yeah, a book that immediately jumps to mind is a book called Atomic Habits, and it's about getting 1% better. This is making small incremental changes, in your day to day, that if you do that over the course of a long period, you can really, increase your efficiency, your productivity, your output, which, results in, hopefully more money, promotions, that type of thing. I'm actually expecting a book today, Amplify Your Influence. And it's written by a guy named Rene Rodriguez. And my guilty pleasure is TikTok. And so I saw him on TikTok and I was like, wow, that's a really good book, and so he talks to you about how to be an influencer. And that's really, I think about books that help me to be a leader if I'm not in a leadership role, because that's where real leadership comes in, is whenever you can lead and influence from not a position of authority, right? So I, oh man, so Atomic Habits, that book. I would really reference any of John Maxwell's leadership books. He's got so many. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, that was a really good one. He's got Leadership 360, which is, again, goes into, figuring out how to lead without being in a leadership role. So those are a few good ones that jump to mind. I've got tons of books. I just can't think of the titles off the top of my head.
No worries, no worries. That's so interesting what you said, leading when not in a position, or when not in a leadership position, or when you don't have any power, basically. That is something, that's not the first time that sentence has come up on this podcast. And I agree with that so much. Learning, I think that can really affect, your current state at your current job. So the trajectory of your career, like crazy, as you said, just kind of raising the influence that you have currently.
Brendan Burchard's got another good book. I can't think of the name of it. Look up Brendan Burchard. He's got a really good book. I read it probably 2 years ago, and it's a book about basically just having powerful habits that help you move forward. So he's a good guy to look at from a reading perspective.
Definitely. And I'll put links to all of that in our show notes for everybody listening, degreefree.co/podcast. And yes, Jerry, I know that you gave a little plug earlier to your LinkedIn. Anywhere else that people could go to find more about you, to follow along in your career, just to say hi?
LinkedIn is pretty much it. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I don't get on Facebook a whole lot. And that's more about friends, family, and fun. But LinkedIn is where I do most of my professional stuff. And I'll as I kind of grow my business from coaching, I'll expect to have a presence a little bit more credible than what I have today. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Perfect. And like I said, links to everything that we talked about, guys, will be in our show notes, degreefree.co/podcast. Jerry, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I think that a lot of people get some value out of this.
I hope so. It was definitely a great conversation. Thank you for a lot of great questions.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Once again, if you haven't already, go to LinkedIn and connect with me. Just search Ryan Maruyama, Maruyama. You can find links to everything that we talked about at degreefree.co/Jerry Condra. And last but not least, please review the podcast and share it with a friend. Until next time, guys. Aloha.